I don't think Mega Man Legends gets nearly enough credit. I mean, we're talking about a 3D action-adventure game for the PlayStation 1 that was released worldwide before The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time on Nintendo 64. If you somehow didn't know, that game defined how to make a 3D action-adventure game. Many of its staple design elements are still traceable in games made to this day. But meanwhile, the Mega Man franchise took a stab at the concept before that game was released and was met with decently positive reception when it first came out. Mega Man Legends is a much different game from any other game under the Mega Man umbrella. Basically, every Mega Man and Mega Man X game released before Legends was a 2D side-scroller. It was a tried-and-true method of game design. But in the mid to late 90s, every legacy franchise was under pressure to take advantage of the new consoles to make a fully 3D game. Some games were able to find ways of translating their systems to 3D and becoming some of the most legendary and influential titles of all time, like Mario and Zelda, while others struggled to find their footing. The fact that Mega Man would try at all is interesting, since today the Mega Man franchise is almost the poster child for never trying to evolve and instead iterating on the original gameplay whenever we do get the rare sequel. But Legends was released in a different era where a legacy IP like this could take more risks and tried new ideas. I've played Mega Man Legends and Mega Man Legends 2 twice before, however it's been a long time since I last played either one. It's been about a decade now since I last played this series. With my channel having had such a Mega Man focus in the last decade, fans have requested I covered the Legends series on multiple occasions, and it's finally time I deliver on that, as I'm very excited to see what I think of these games with a fresh set of eyes. So let's pop this disc into this completely unplugged PlayStation for visual aid, load the game in the emulator, and start playing. If you need a refresher, the Mega Man timeline goes like this. The classic Mega Man series takes place in 20XX, the Mega Man X games are 100 years in the future, the Mega Man Zero games are another 100 years later, and the Mega Man ZX duology are 200 years after that. Mega Man Legends is the end of the main Mega Man timeline, taking place thousands of years after Mega Man ZX. In the Legends era, the world is covered in nearly endless water. There are some islands and dig sites above ground, but most people live scattered on the islands. It's been this way so long that not many really know what the world was like before. But dig sites go deep underground and are littered with treasure and refractors which people of the current day use for power. Dig teams are assembled and travel by air or by sea to search for treasure and refractors. In our team, we have Mega Man Volnut, who does the digging underground, and his spotter, Roll Casket, to guide him through the levels from their flying home, the Flutter. Also with them is Roll's grandfather, Barrel Casket, and their pet robot monkey called Data. He saves your game and refills your health. All dig teams are in search of the greatest treasure in the world, the Mother Lode, which has never been found. Which brings you up to speed in the premise of the game as you dive right in as Mega Man on a dig. The opening area is a very simple tutorial dungeon, as it's quite brief and has some basic hallways in it, and Roll will tell you how to lock onto enemies and look around rooms. That will teach you combat and how to get around areas, since she tells you where to go the entire time. The level ends with an easy boss fight against a Reaver bot, robots that patrol the dig sites. Mega Man escapes in the nick of time with a refractor, but the Flutter crash lands on a nearby island called Cadillac's Island, where Mega Man looks at the guidance system and says that the island is 100 miles away before they crash land there 2 seconds later. Maybe he meant to say 100 feet, I don't know. But either way, the team is stranded while the Flutter needs to be repaired, and on the island they meet a host of nice people you can interact with as you protect them from the Bond family, a group of air pirates seeking the treasure inside the main gate buried on the island. Which is just enough context to set you up for the journey of Mega Man Legends. I was just hyping up how Ocarina of Time revolutionized 3D combat action at the beginning for a reason. In the early 3D era, it was the Wild West of testing out what worked and what didn't, because the well-established conventions from 2D games couldn't all be faithfully adapted. And again, many games had systems that didn't work, and the ones that did continued to be iterated upon in future generations. Mega Man Legends is a game that isn't as smooth with 3D combat as Ocarina of Time, but it had the right ideas, and was similar to what that game would come up with. Obviously, Mega Man is known for shooting from an arm cannon and not swinging a sword, so it's not going to be similar in that sense, just that the game knew there needed to be a way for you to focus your attacks on enemies and also evade them in a 3D space. An issue that would not arise in a 2D game. By default, Mega Man moves forward by pressing up on the D-pad and back by pressing down. He strafes to the left and right with those buttons, and you use L1 and R1 to turn in place. However, I suggest going into the menu and swapping left and right with L1 and R1. This way, you turn with the directional buttons and strafe with the shoulder buttons. It feels much more natural like this to strafe with the shoulder buttons while firing with the face buttons than it does to use the D-pad on the other side of the controller. There are basically two modes of combat in Legends. You have the strafe where you'll circle around your foes and blast them, but the trade-off is that there's no targeting in this mode, you just have to hope that your shots will connect. If you're circling a stationary object or a large enemy, the odds are you'll hit them, but with fast-moving smaller targets, the hit-to-miss ratio is a little more skewed. To combat this, you can use the other mode of attacking. While stationary, pressing R2 is how you lock onto enemies. Doesn't matter if the enemies are up or down, R2 is how you can fire at them, and if your shot has the range to reach them, they'll get hit. The trade-off is that you can't move, so if the enemy has projectiles or rushes you, you're gonna take damage. So if you've played Zelda and this, you can see how the designers behind Legends had similar ideas, the execution is just a bit more clunky. For example, strafing and firing blindly hoping to land hits is a system that works well enough, but it's not the most elegant solution for how to dodge and fire in 3D. But in many ways, this was probably some of the best they could do with the hardware they were working with. You see, Mega Man Legends came out before the PS1 DualShock controller with 2 analog sticks. This game had to make use with the original PS1 controller that didn't have analog sticks at all and had 4 face buttons, 4 shoulder buttons, and a D-pad. The controller just didn't really have the amount of buttons to comfortably allow you to control the camera and move and shoot and lock on at the same time. When on the N64 controller you had the stick and the lock-on button behind it and the face buttons on the right. You can't control the camera at all in Mega Man Legends, so it's fixed behind Mega Man. You change your viewpoint by turning into a different direction. Another reason I swapped the turn buttons at the beginning, because I just felt that using the D-pad to look around and change my direction in less combat-intense moments made more sense than the shoulder buttons, which are much better for using mid-fight alongside the face buttons. The camera system is another one that's effective enough for what it is, but it isn't perfect. I do like how there's a sound effect that plays whenever you're near a hostile, whether you can see them or not. It gets your mind primed to fight before you feel the need to look up and down. But other times, it's not the best, because the camera, while strafing, is still fixed on Mega Man, not the enemies. So they can go off screen or hit you from behind if you're dealing with more than one enemy at a time. And then sometimes the AI will be active the moment you walk into a room, whether you've gained control yet or not. Like, wow, what an idiot I was for my inability to predict that. But still, even with these limitations, I think Mega Man Legends deserves a lot of praise for how it designed 3D combat for Mega Man. This is a series that's gameplay thrived in the 2D space. Legends was willing to start completely from scratch and came up with a system not dissimilar to one of the most influential games of all time that just happened to release a few months later. And I will say, it was very difficult to avoid making any jokes at the expense of Mega Man X7 throughout the last several paragraphs, given how that game hilariously crashed and burned at all those things, despite releasing years after Legends, but that's neither here nor there. With any good adventure game comes a bunch of upgrades. You can equip several buster parts. At first, you can only attach 2 upgrades at a time, but later it can be upgraded to 3. Buster parts enhance certain stats for Volnut. There's strength, energy, range, and speed. Strength should go without saying. It just makes your buster shots more powerful. Range also speaks for itself. Energy is interesting though, because that determines how many shots you can fire before the buster needs to cool down. You know how in most Mega Man side-scrollers you can only have 3 buster pellets on screen at a time? It's the same in Legends by default, but by increasing your energy stat, that number goes up, and if it's maxed, it'll be near infinite shots. I thought this was more worthwhile than the speed stat, because that just increases how quickly the shots are fired, but all 4 have uses. Different buster parts increase these stats by different amounts, and you can mix and match which configurations you like the most. I tried having a good mix of power, energy, and range. But there were always moments that necessitated doing something different, like the Air Pirate boss fight towards the end of the game. I put everything I had into range to make sure I could get as many hits in as possible on the enemies. But in close quarters, power was the best thing to focus on. And as the game goes on and you unlock more buster parts, some of them will increase multiple stats at once, giving you more freedom to experiment with what style you like without sacrificing whatever stat you may also want to use. It's a pretty effective system, and I thought it worked pretty well. Of course, there are also upgrades to Mega Man's mobility, like the high jump boots you build, which also allows you to find upper areas you couldn't earlier with ease, or the rocket boots, which allows you to travel much faster, armor to reduce damage, and a helmet to reduce knockback. These were pretty essential. I mean, the Kevlar armor reduces damage by half, and I was still taking a lot of damage from late game enemies, so you definitely want to get this. Getting these upgrades is another fun part of the game world. You have to interact with the various citizens of Cadillacs Island, and your first taste of that is the Apple Market downtown. Most of it's flavor text though, like how in the electronics shop, where they're still selling expensive and heavy CRTs in the year 104XX or whatever this game is. But the woman at the junk shop will sell you stuff if you help her husband stuck in a nearby dig site. At the junk shop, you can find all kinds of stuff like the buster part upgrades or armor pieces or the energy canteen, which is kind of like the sub-tank in Mega Man X, as you can use it to refill your health, at the cost needed to go back to the shop for it to be refilled. You'll also find various junk parts by exploring. If you take them to Roll in the R&D lab, she can mix and match parts to make you new gear, and that's how you get the helmet and the roller skates, for example. The R&D lab is where the special weapons come from. Some special weapons and gear can be made from one collectible you can find, while others require multiple. But the process is the same. Bring everything you have to Roll and she'll make whatever she can from the stuff you have. But I found the special weapon system to be really unremarkable. At first, I had a mine gun, but the range wasn't that great and enemies weren't running into it when I tried to use it. Then I had a bomb glove type weapon and it doesn't explode on contact, so you have to hope enemies will be in range of the explosion. There are more useful weapons later on, like a seeker missile, but it never did enough damage or had a fast enough rate of fire to be preferable in combat to the Buster. You can upgrade the stats on all of your special weapons, but that costs valuable money, and with that money I'd rather just buy Buster upgrades and health upgrades at the junk shop. To make matters worse, you can't even swap out special weapons in the middle of gameplay like every other Mega Man game. You can only do it at the R&D lab, and can only have one at a time, which I just thought was a needless restriction. So basically, you want to get the drill arm because it can be used to plow through these walls in the underground caverns which hide secrets, and then you want to do the game-wide side quest to unlock the shining laser. To do it, you need to help this squad of guys build their hideout and get one part of the weapon from them, and then do other missions to get the other pieces. It's well worth it though, because the shining laser shreds through health bars, including the final boss. There are many side quests you can do on the island, like when I first reached the Uptown area and went into the TV station and was swept away to be on their game shows. It's a charming setup, and you can get a lot of Zenny from doing these side quests, which is the game's currency. You also get Zenny and upgrades from exploring underground caverns like I implied before. But then there are also mandatory main story missions. In fact, that's what you'll be doing for the most part once you land on the island. In order to get players up to speed with the characters in the setting, you spend most of the first 2 hours of the game on missions, because the Bonds attacked the island right as Mega Man and crew crashed there, so you get action missions and boss fights one after another where the Bonds realize they got a real menace on their hands here. These missions were fine, though they were also the moments where I realized the special weapons weren't that useful and that the camera isn't the greatest when trying to navigate boss battles. This was also where I learned just how vital it was to save your game. In the Dig boss fight with Teasel Bon, I died, and when you do, your ass is booted back to the title screen. You need to load the save file. Best to do that as often as possible, but as the missions and bosses go on, you start to get comfortable with the gameplay if you weren't already. I was impressed with the game's world. It's easy to take this sort of thing for granted in 2026, but I thought it was pretty cool to run around this early 3D space that comes with some realistic physics too. One of the most famous parts of this game is I can kick this can around in the Apple Market and try to land it in the trash can. But the way it bounces around the walls had me thinking, you know, that's pretty impressive for a 1997 game. Hats off to the developers for making it like that. I found the whole package very impressive on a presentation level too. The game's graphics are very basic, but the game kinda ties it all together in a way that makes it seem more stylistic than a product of its console. There's a reason why the characters are all kind of blocky that I'll get into later. The buildings are all kind of square looking because the game has a 3D anime aesthetic. In terms of in-engine cutscene presentation, I think Mega Man Legends is some of the finest work on the console. I wouldn't say it looks as good as a Crash Bandicoot game, but for a game with far more cutscenes, it looks really good. The game utilized motion capture for much of the movement in the scenes, and then used sprites to give the characters lively anime-like expressions in the cutscenes, which is what gives the game the edge over a lot of other PS1 era games where facial animation was just not something the developers could have accomplished convincingly. And most shockingly of all, the game has good voice acting. Not Metal Gear Solid or Crash 3 voice acting, but decent. Every character sounds appropriately cartoony and has a voice that suits the character they're playing. This is especially astonishing because Mega Man 8 and Mega Man X4 were released on PS1 around the same time as Legends and have absolutely bottom-of-the-barrel atrocious acting. All these elements combine to a pretty enjoyable story, too. Not gonna be like the greatest you've ever seen, mind you, but entertaining. You quickly buy into Volnut and his relationships with Roll and Gramps and Data. They're just an endearing cast of heroes. Roll and Data provide such essential gameplay services as well that it makes you enjoy the characters more. And then, the Bonds are the most iconic parts of the Legends series. They're a group of rogues who have comedic banter with each other, and they keep coming back with more outrageous machines, which was funny to me. Like, I kept thinking, despite having played this game before, that they were going to be gone past certain points like the Sky Boss or the Old Town Boss, but they always had another trick up their sleeve. I even bought into the gag where Teasel announces they're giving up only to be like, haha, I'd never quit. Teasel is their money-hungry leader, Tron is the inventor who grows to have a crush on Mega Man, and Bon is a giant robot baby.
And they lead an army of Servbots, who are some of the most iconic Capcom mascots,
cameoing in plenty of other Capcom games because they're cute and funny. It's all to the point where Tron Bon got a spin-off game I'll talk about in the next video, and she's even playable in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and 3. But now we're however many minutes into the video and I haven't talked about the main levels, the dungeons, or subgates as they're called. I saved them for the end as it would be a good lead into the conclusion, but also because compared to the other elements there's not really much to say. Again, I'll be fair, this is a pre-Ocarina of Time world, which set a huge precedent for how complex your 3D dungeon crawler could be with its puzzles and design elements. Not that they were super complex, but far more than this game. The first dungeon, like I said, you only reach after nearly 2 hours of game time, and it didn't have much going on except some basic rooms with enemies and more loot to find, like the mini caverns you'll explore. The first dungeon only has one major puzzle, and it's not that complicated. You need to drop this chest to the ground, but it's frozen shut, and the chest has a key in it. So you need to activate the conveyor belt to get it moving towards the crusher 2 floors down. The belt needs to be activated at every floor, and I was thinking this was something you'd have to pay attention to at every level for fear of a backtrack, but no. You can just get on the conveyor belt and get taken right there. So the puzzle was very one note, and I got the key, and then just walked up the conveyor belt to get back to where I was. That was pretty underwhelming. The second dungeon also doesn't have a lot going on either, to the point where my only note about it while playing was that this was the first one to have a boss fight. You can also come back to these dungeons to re-explore them with new items if you wish, like the second one has a high ledge right next to the entrance and you're going to want to come back with the high jump boots, but backtracking through a dungeon was pretty much forced on me in the third one. The third subgate is only playable once the flutter is fixed and you fly to it. In the flutter, it was funny how Roll and Gramps have these rooms that are all filled up with stuff displaying personality, and then Volnut's room has literally nothing in it but a bed, an end table, and some med supplies like he's riding an MGS2 or something. But anyway, the third dungeon is also nothing special. You need to find keys to power up a thing to get a huge refractor, but in order to get the last key, you need a special weapon that will blow up this weak ceiling. I didn't know that before coming in here, so I kept looking around for something only to realize I needed to go make a weapon I didn't have and come back. That was disruptive to my playing experience, but if you know it's coming, you can prepare for that in advance. But then the final dungeon does require you to leave halfway through. It's called the main gate, and it might actually be the least interesting one in the whole game. It's just hallways leading down with a few enemies in it. It does have kinda hype endgame music playing though, which is a break from normal since the other ones have ambient noise as the background. But the level design was not really doing much here. The worst part is how you get to the bottom and you press a button to open the sub-cities up. These are 3 mini combat rooms that open up in the overworld, and then you need to leave the dungeon to go back to the surface and then track down these old cities. And then you beat the enemies and you get 3 keys needed to reach the final boss. This is quite the pace killer if I do say so myself, especially since these combat rooms aren't really testing you on anything you haven't done already. The first one gave me more of a run for my money though, because I'd yet to buy the Kevlar armor. But once you do beat all of them, you can make it to the final boss, and I have to say then, the final reveals kinda came out of nowhere. The final boss is this robot called Mega Man Juno that has been asleep on Cadillac's island for a long time. He reveals that the people on the island, and in fact all people in the Legends games, are called carbons. The Mega Man timeline has been all about how the gap between humans and robots is shrinking with each series. The classic series had a hard line between the two as robot masters didn't have free will. In the X series, Reploids did have human free will. In the Zero series, Reploids were treated as second-class citizens due to the energy crisis. But by the ZX games, humans were being given robotic attachments to even out the physical differences between them. Anyway, by Legends, there's just one species, carbons. Everyone is organic, but also kind of a robot at the same time, which is why everyone is so blocky. But anyway, Juno comes from a mysterious overlord group that isn't seen in this game, and they have an annihilation protocol of carbon begin to overpopulate a spot, and Juno begins the process for Cadillac's island, leaving Mega Man in a trap, but the Bonds actually save him while looking for treasure in the main gate, which was kind of a nice moment. But then it turns out that Mega Man and Data are from this mysterious class of rulers, and Data just knows that, and Mega Man has amnesia of all of it. Data explaining that he'll explain it at a later date. Things Legends 1 just drops on your lap right at the end of the game with no elaboration, so it feels kinda sudden. The localization also messes with the story here, like learning Volnut is one of these elite Mega Man units is an odd plot twist because his name is already Mega Man. So his first name doesn't change at all. Roll just happened to name him Mega Man. In Japan, Roll named him Rock Volnut, and then he discovers the truth. But then I guess the localization team feared him not being named Mega Man if that was the title of the game for some reason, so therefore his name is just Mega Man. It's like how in the English versions of X2 and X3, X is referred to by his full name, Mega Man X, when he's supposed to only go by X, and then X3 just calls him Mega Man with no X in the text box. But anyway, the final boss is a decent challenge. You're going to want to make sure you've mastered how to strafe and shoot because many attacks will not be easy to counter if you're relying on lock-on alone. But then you can't mindlessly do it either because Phase 2 will have many high damage ground pound attacks followed by ceiling lasers, so you need to stay on your toes. But it's not a super tough final boss. but it is the hardest boss in the game for sure. In the end, Data helps Mega Man shut off the Annihilation Beam and the family leaves the island on a flutter, celebrated by the people of Catalox as heroes. Before you leave, the final playable sequence is getting to run around the island one last time and say goodbye to whichever NPCs you liked the most, or all of them, which is a nice little bit of world building for the end of the game. But yeah, the day is saved and the heroes will keep looking for the Mother Lode and Roll's parents, ending Mega Man Legends. Not before learning that the Bonds actually got the huge refractor in the main gate, so love that for them. Glad they got a W. But in the end, Mega Man Legends is a game that just works. It was hard to parse how I felt about the game overall when I was done with my playthrough because I think the game has many strengths and weaknesses. But I just really liked the package. I don't think it's the greatest game ever, and I'm not going to replay it on the regular or anything, but it doesn't need to be worthy of those kinds of accolades to be a really good game. I think it comes together as a package so well because it's a really impressive game for the standards of its time, has an appealing art style that translated well to the 3D graphics, has a fun story, and good gameplay. I don't think the combat was perfectly executed and the dungeons are kinda shit, but Mega Man Legends is a really interesting and unique experience, has a lot of charm to it. Said charm really elevates the game from being an above-average early 3D adventure game into one of Mega Man's most interesting sub-franchises. I really commend Mega Man Legends for being so creative. You know, today there are 7 series under the Mega Man umbrella, so we're kinda used to how varied they can get. But Legends was only the 3rd series. Mega Man X is a huge leap from the classic games, but mostly in graphics and story and ambition. But they were both 2D side-scrollers, so if you liked the original 6 Mega Man games, jumping into Mega Man X was probably not that difficult of a transition. But Mega Man Legends, released alongside Mega Man 8 and Mega Man X4, 2 games that are quite similar, was totally different. This was an era where classic franchises were crashing and burning left and right trying to make a good 3D game, since there weren't a lot of established trends for developers to work with. But here, they took a shot in the dark, created something original that wasn't anything Mega Man had ever done before, and landed on a pretty cool game that gets a lot right and is still enjoyable to play almost 30 years later. One that got a sequel and many spin-offs. Next up, we'll talk about those spin-offs as well as the various Mega Man Legends ports that exist, so I hope folks look forward to that. In the meantime, I can say that I'm happy I got the chance to replay the first Legends game. As I said, I haven't played it in a decade, and I'm happy I enjoyed it like I did way back when. I never played Tron Bonne before, so we'll have to see with regard to that game. But I loved Legends too, and I'm very excited to get to that game in the video after the next one. That's all the time we have for today, so I'm going to close by saying what I always do. If you made it this far into the video, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.